Hmm. Welcome to the Fine Print, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Caleb Teskey, and today I am joined for another artist spotlight by Scottie Raymond from joining me from Burlington. Man, thanks for being here, old boy.
Absolutely my pleasure, bro.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one.
Ah,
Before we get into it, would you give us a 5-minute life story?
shit. I don't know if there is a 5-minute version anymore, but I'll do my best. Yeah.
You got as much time as you need, man. That's just a clever name I thought of.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So I was born in the Bronx, New York. Grew up with my mom and my brother in Clark, New Jersey, right outside of New York City, basically about a half hour outside of New York City. Moved up here when I was like 22, 23, something like that. After college, came to Burlington.
So just yesterday, huh?
Yeah, just yesterday. Yeah, no, it was like 98, I think it was. And I've been here ever since. When I first moved here, I was like, oh, I'll go back to New York someday. Kind of always imagined that would be the case, but I've been here ever since. Met my beautiful wife, had two beautiful daughters, run some businesses into the ground. And yeah, now I'm making art with the Anthill Collective and the Green Door Studio and tattooing at 802 Inc., hosting an annual graffiti festival, hosting hip hop shows, kind of, I guess, something like living the dream of 20, 18-year-old me. My cat apparently wants to be involved in the interview as well. So
cool. She's in.
Chime in. He's kind of mouthy.
That's all right. Will he give us a 5-minute life story?
Silas, what do you got?
The strong silent type. Okay. I'd like to ask you about one of these businesses because I still have a jacket that I bought from you from the Kingdom Outdoors or whatever that place was in St. Jay.
Yeah. Kingdom Outdoors, St. Johnsbury, Vermont. Yeah, so that was like a big moment in my life. One of the biggest chances I ever took, I guess. I had been working for and at the Outdoor Gear Exchange for, I don't know, like 8 or 9 years or something at that time. And the guy who was like my co-manager, Lou Apgar, his father passed away, left him a little chunk of money, and he really wanted to do something smart with it, or we thought it was smart at the time anyway, invest it, and try to invest in our future. And he was living in Lyndonville with his wife, Sue. I was totally unfamiliar with the area, to be honest with you, didn't really know much about it. But Peter Glenn Sports had just recently gone out of business.
That's right, yeah.
The St. Johnsbury fixture. And he wanted to open an outdoor gear shop. And, between us, we seemingly had all the tools. We had managed the Outdoor Gear Exchange. We kind of have very different passions. He was wicked into like skiing, cross-country skiing, hiking and things like that. I was much more the extreme sport, snowboarder, rock climber, mountain biker, kind of that world. We'd always kind of done different pieces of the business while we were working together. And so it seemed like it made sense. It was like this big moment. So we moved, his family actually bought the building, I think that Peter Glenn had been in. His wife's family bought the building.
Okay.
And we moved in and started renting it. We opened the space, and within a month we had it cleaned out, repainted, and stocked with fresh product. And we moved in and started a business. It was kind of like hiking, rock climbing, that world focused. And then we had a tiny little skate shop in the basement. I knew that for a very small amount of money, I could open a skate shop as well. That I figured, a town like St. Johnsbury, there's all these young kids. There's not a lot else going on. Maybe like skateboarding would hit. And that was honestly, it was like a very last minute decision to open the skate shop. It was like just like last week, I was like, yo, I could put in an order right now for like $1,000 and we could have a skate shop in the basement and see how it goes. We just had so much space too. It was like more room than we knew what to do with.
Yeah, I forgot they had that whole downstairs section.
That's where the skate shop was originally. Yeah. And so we opened up and, had the first season, I think we opened in like May or June. I can't even remember. Maybe it was April. And the first season went great. You know, we were like, holy cow, it almost better than we thought it could. And then the economic collapse during Obama's presidency
Oh,
took
was
place.
this the housing market? Yeah,
Yep.
like 2008. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Damn.
And it was just like we went from this, you know, and we had that great first season, and we bought accordingly to go into
Oh,
our second season. Like, we're gonna grow the business.
damn.
And then all of a sudden it was like crickets. And you know, I feel that there was like some big business up there that like 3,000 people lost their jobs. It was like in Lindenville or something like that. This big factory building that
Oh,
was there.
maybe like NSA or something like that. Could have
I
been. Yeah.
don't, I can't remember, but a lot of people lost their jobs. And you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
and that area kind of is like notoriously somewhat, you know, hard hit financially.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money up in the hills, but there's you know,
Yeah.
the town itself is pretty
Yeah.
poor.
Even without any housing market collapses, we're already kind of tight for money up there.
Yeah. And so yeah, so this shit hit the fan. And we tried and we tried, and we asked some of our vendors to like take product back from us, but they couldn't or wouldn't do it because we
They
were
were
still,
probably in the same boat.
and we were like a tiny little account that, you know, had just started, and they were like, you know, we got people with 10 times as much product as you have who would love for us to take product back. So yeah, so we, you know, we stuck with it and struggled with it for about like 2 years, and then we started liquidating. You know, and during that time, my wife and I bought like this beautiful log cabin up in Newark, Vermont, that unfortunately had a horrendous roof that was leaking something fierce, and we couldn't afford to fix it. And we had just had a baby, and you know, we already had she was what, 5 at the time, 6 at the, you know, we
Oh,
had,
that was wild. That was wild seeing her at Green Door Studios the other day. I haven't seen her since she was like a little, yeah,
yeah,
fly to a grasshopper.
not a baby in a stroller anymore. Um, so yeah, it was like, you know, all of these things combined. And so we lost the house, we lost the business. You know, Mary Beth and I were basically bankrupt, short of ever declaring bankruptcy. Um, she moved back to Burlington, took the kids with her, and I was kind of like, for a minute there, I was like, oh shit, did everything just collapse? Like,
Wow.
did I lose my family? Um, but I managed to get myself back to Burlington as well, get my feet back under myself. I started working at a group home for a little while because I like the idea of going back to working retail and selling shit to people was just like, no
What'd you
way.
do at the group home?
I was like a counselor, sort of. You know, basically like residential counseling. I worked at a group home where there were like 6 kids between the ages of 15 and 19 years old.
Are we talking like at-risk youth, maybe?
Yeah, beyond at risk. These are like kids who like no other program could house them, kind of a thing. Couldn't be at home
This is
anymore.
like a last resort sort of deal.
Yeah, most of them had already been through the Brattleboro retreat program, things like that. You know, these were kids who like, yeah,
They were dealing with drug problems and maybe behavioral issues and
all of
yeah.
the above. Yeah, you know, kids who cut and who had suicidal tendencies and were drug use, and you know, were involved in relationships with older men. And I mean, it was, you know, it ran the gamut. And it was, yeah, you know, I mean, honestly, like, I didn't know that was something I ever wanted to do.
I was gonna say that's a little bit out of your kind of range of things that you typically do.
Yeah, it was a twist, man. When I got back to Burlington, and a good friend of mine, Pete Cudney, he was the one who ran the program over there. He was like the director of the program, and I think he just knew that like my tail was between my legs and I didn't know what the hell to do with myself. And he was like, man, I've always thought you'd be really good at this. And so he
Cool.
invited me in. I got interviewed by like all of the 21 and 22-year-old women who were running the program. Like literally, I walked into a room full of girls, and I was like, "Oh boy, here we go." And I told them my story. You know, that's a bit like I'm doing right now. Like, I just kind of told them my life story, and they like half of them were in tears by the end of it. And I got the job, and I worked there for like 2.5 or 3 years. That was kind of how I got my feet back under me here in Burlington. You know, after that stint in the Northeast Kingdom there.
And you didn't lose your family.
I didn't lose my family. I was, yeah, it was, it was a scary moment, to be honest. Like not that Mary Beth ever gave me the inclination that she was leaving, but it was just like things were falling apart.
Yeah,
I'm trying to figure out how to get out of this house. And now my wife is gone and she's like
yeah.
living at home with her mom and her dad. And I was like, dude, if I were her mom and her dad right now, I'd be convincing this woman to
Right. The
like,
guy's got a leaky roof in his cabin.
yeah,
His
cut your
business.
losses and get rid of this dead weight, you know, like, you know, Mary Beth graduated Middlebury College with like a 3.8 GPA. And, you know, other than the fact that she was now strapped down with 2 children, she didn't need to be strapped down with me as well. So, but yeah, and that, yeah, so that was, you know, like I had been in Vermont, in Burlington for about 10 years before we did that. We did that, you know, Lou and I just had to cut our losses. And yeah, then I was back in Burlington. But I mean, we did a lot of cool stuff while I was there in St. Johnsbury. You know, we built a small skate park for the kids. We definitely really got involved in the community. We were hosting open mics on a regular basis. I mean, I had people talking to me all the time about like, you're going to be the next town manager or whatever they call the guy there who's like the mayor. And I, you know, I was like sitting on the board of multiple different local organizations. I was involved.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, that's lovely. St. J doesn't seem like your kind of place, though. Although I'd say it doesn't seem like anyone's kind of place.
I mean, you know, it made sense geographically, we thought, because it's like the gateway between the Green Mountains and the White Mountains, right? And so
okay.
A lot of people drive back and forth through
Okay,
there.
I guess if you were selling ski gear, yeah, or yeah,
on their way to do those things. That was our theory anyway.
Okay.
I didn't move to St. Johnsbury because I was like, this seems like a lovely town. It was more of like, what could we do here? You know, maybe we could make this a cooler town.
Heroin. That's what we could do.
Didn't do any of the heroin while I was
good man. Me either.
I ate a lot of dinner at Elements.
Oh yeah, cool. That was a great little spot.
That was great back. That's where I met Tommy Rowlett, who was you know, another St. Johnsbury kid.
Where did you meet my mom?
She came into the shop and basically like inserted herself. She was like, I'm going to work for you. And we were like, we're not even hiring. And she was like, that's fine. I just want a place to hang out and you guys seem great. Possibly Lou might have already met her like at the outing club before that or something like that. But I had never met your mom until I opened that business. She walked in and just like became the den mother, which I gather is pretty much what she does everywhere she goes.
Yeah, we used to be in Cub Scouts and she was literally our den mother. So
yeah.
But it was just, yeah. I just noted you said you guys built a little skate park in St. J, and I know she built that skate park up at the outing club. And
yep,
I was wondering
probably right around the time they knocked down the one we built in St. J. Yeah, and yeah, your mom just showed up and was kind of like, you know, she was someone we needed, not from like connect. I mean, obviously she had a lot of connections and she did really help us out in a lot of ways, but we just needed to like feel connected to the community, and she just came in and made us feel at home. You know,
she's a good way to feel that way.
Yeah, she's real good at that. So
okay, shameless shout out to mom.
I'll take it.
I'm sure she's gonna watch this one.
It seems likely that she would like to see this conversation play out.
Yeah. So now I'm going to go into, you mentioned some of these earlier, but I'd like to just sort of run down the list of some of the things you've been involved with. And the first thing here is the Anthill Collective. And I'd like to ask you sort of how you got that going and maybe the significance of the ant.
The ant. So the Anthill Collective, who, you know, on paper is Brian Clark, who I know has already been on the show, Capes One. It's on paper, that's he and I. It's like, that's the LLC, that's the business that we formed. And we've probably been on paper and legal with the state of Vermont for like a decade now or so. He and I met at the very first wall to canvas competition, which was a like street art performance competition sort of thing that Magic Hat used to host back in the day. It was, you had 2.5 hours to make a painting live in front of a crowd, and then they would do an auction afterwards. And we met at the very first one, and we were like the two old men who both showed up with a crate full of spray paint. I had, you know, some other stuff as well, but we like caught each other like, yo, you okay?
Are you old
Um,
too? Are you?
you're old too, and you actually are gonna paint. Like, a lot of people had wheat pastes and stencils and all this other street art type stuff, and we really thought it was like a graffiti competition. Um, but it wasn't. I mean, it was. There were definitely some graph writers there. Um, but anyway, like I said, we were like the two old men, um, and connected in that moment. And then it turned out that we also shared a friend, this guy named Sky, who used to run a business called Motion Mate, which was like an energy drink business he was trying to jumpstart here in Vermont. And we were both friends of his through that. Um, and so we ended up like collaborating on Skies. He had a big Sprinter van that he was driving all over the place, constantly going surfing, mountain biking, whatever. And Capes painted one side of it for him, and I painted the other side with some of my homies. And it was like our first collaboration. Um, and then we were just like, yo, we should get together and paint sometime. And we started working on projects a little bit, just kind of messing around, like going out and painting graph and or like finding little walls where we could do some stuff. And then like, I don't know, something just started to click. I had just moved into a studio down on Pine Street, which was in the original Arts Riot space, not the restaurant bar venue that they're currently in or not in anymore, or whatever the status of Arts Riot is. But um, when they had originally started, they started in like an old studio space. They moved in, they had an event space, and then they rented out some of the spaces in the back. And one of them was the old hood vent room from Karen's Auto Body. So it had like a full blown exhaust system in it.
Oh,
So
nice.
I could spray paint inside.
That's
Um,
nice.
and so
Convenient.
I had this studio that I wasn't really using all that actively. And I was like, yo, why don't you come and check out the studio? Maybe you'd be into sharing the space with me. Um, and so Capes moved into the studio with me. We just kind of
That's
like
awesome.
started picking up little jobs, and it was also like right around the time of the food truck, the beginning of the food truck revolution.
Uh,
And
cool.
like all of a sudden we had food trucks to paint and little
Oh,
projects and stuff. And like originally we were working basically just to rack paint, like just to get spray paint so that we would always have paint. It
you're
was
like
like
a low-level weed dealer who's just selling weed so you can get free
so I can
weed.
get high. Yeah, basically. Yeah, we were just like we were doing projects super cheap. We'd be like, well, we need like at least $300 for paint. And we'd go and buy $300 worth of paint and use $100 worth of paint and have, and we'd have
Pocket the
paint.
rest. Yeah, yeah.
So like one of the big moments was like we finally filled this one closet that we had with spray paint. We felt like we were kings, we did it. Um, but and then it just kind of kept going from there. We kept doing projects together. We got a few mural projects. We did a couple of things like that. And then there just kind of came this point, like he was still bartending full time at J Peak, and he was still managing the restaurants
I
at
was
J
gonna
Peak.
say, is he a bart? He doesn't strike me as the bartender type. He's
He's a bartender at J
is
Peak.
he?
I can't believe that
He's
didn't
so
come up.
quiet.
Yeah, he's not in a bar. But yeah, so he was still the full-time restaurant manager up there at J Peak, and I was still working at the Outdoor Gear Exchange because I eventually, after the group home thing, I went back to the Outdoor Gear Exchange because I just needed a full-time job, and frankly was also kind of like the girls that I was working with at the group home and the girls I was raising in my home began to like the lines got blurry, and I was like, am I messing these kids up, and what's going on here? But anyway, so I
Yeah,
didn't
that's a
want to
tricky
have a
one.
full didn't want to do that anymore. So I was back to Outdoor Gear Exchange, but it started to get to the point where it was like we can't do both. Like if we're ever really gonna try this Anthill thing, what we're gonna have to like not be working full time because we were working around our jobs and always kind of having to stretch and make it work. And so we both just sort of leaned in. Um, and that's like the turning point. We had already establish the name and become a business. The Anthill, the idea of the Anthill is that like ants work really well together. Like the many hands make light work kind of a concept. Like they're incredibly collaborative. They will sacrifice themselves for the whole. All of those kinds of aspects of the ant. And it was like I had I've always wanted to be working as a muralist or a graffiti writer, you know, like what I wanted to work in the arts my whole life, but I always felt like one of the biggest boundaries was like not having a crew, not having this team that you could be like, all right, we got a big project. Where the hell are all of you? How do we put it all together? Um, and so that was really kind of where it started, like Brian and I working together, and then we would bring other artists in that were like maybe had a certain specific expertise or just that had time, or we started working with this young buck Harrison, who
Woody Harrelson.
No,
Is
Harrison Holmes is his name.
but that's the kid, bro, right?
What's that?
Is that the same kid? There's a kid who shows up to Green Door Studios who looks like Woody Harrelson. I thought his name was Harrison.
I mean, I guess, yeah, he might kind of look like Woody Harrelson.
A tall kid?
Nah, he's not that tall.
Okay, never mind. Different guy.
I don't think you've met him. He lives in Brooklyn currently, but he's from Colchester, and he was like 16 when we first met him and started kind of mentoring him as part of the Anthill. He always was like in our studio spaces with us over the years until he went to Linden State, or no, not Linden State. I'm sorry, Johnson State, which is Vermont College or whatever it's called. Yeah. But he was a part of the crew, and we had some other graph writers who were a part of the crew, and and we had DJs and stuff, and we just like started trying to figure out how we could all make things work, and like make events happen together, make projects happen together. And that's where the name the Anthill comes from. And like I said, it is now, it's DJs like Kanga, MCs like Humble and Mav and Conflict, and like, I mean, there's a lot of people. You walk around the state of Vermont, you go to a hip hop show or you go to a graffiti wall, you're gonna see an Anthill hat. Usually, I'm not rocking one right now, but they're pretty prominent out there in the scene. And that's all. Those are. It's like people who we all joined forces out of a love for hip hop music, graffiti, art. The whole hip hop culture, basically.
And this is like a Captain Planet type of move here, where your powers combine, and then you
something much more.
Yeah, you bring pollution down to zero.
We definitely we become much more when we work together, and that's sort of the idea. And so yeah, then there were, like I said, there was that point where like Brian and I decided to really lean in. And start committing to it. And that's been 6 or 7 years or something like that now. And, at times it's worked brilliantly. And at times it's not been enough. And, and we both have kind of always had to have a side hustle or another job. Like I said, he still bartends up at JP. I was working at a bar for a little while, was doing like food delivery for, kind of like always had to do something else to make ends meet. Until I started tattooing, but maybe we're not. We might not be tattooing just yet. So
yeah, no, that's not the end of the list. Don't jump ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, but like if you could at least make your art become your primary hustle, and then maybe your job becomes your side hustle, that might also be a little nice as well.
Yeah, really at the time that was kind of the goal. It was like, can we have enough? Yeah, can we make enough doing this so that this can be our business and this can be our deal? Right. And yeah, I might still have to do this for a week at a time or whatever, might still have to squeeze some other things in.
Pick a couple of shifts up at the bar. Like I wouldn't mind that, like a couple of days a week bartending. And then, right. Like I can handle that. It's all the time bartending that fucking drives me insane.
All the time, anything where you're working for someone else, doing something that you're not in love with, and it's like, I mean, all those, like I worked over a decade at the Outdoor Gear Exchange. It's not like I didn't love it. I loved the people. I loved the team. I loved the outdoors. I love all of it. But it was just like, yeah, that 9-to-5 grind selling plastic to people that don't need it, So.
9 to 5 is how you survive. I ain't trying to survive. I'm trying to live it to the limit and love it a lot or something.
Well, I don't know if that was like a Taylor Swift song or what you just did, but...
Let's keep going. Tell me about A-Dog Day.
A-Dog, yeah, Friends for A-Dog, man. I mean, so the funny thing is, like, technically the Anthill has very little to do with A-Dog Day. A-Dog, DJ A-Dog was, obviously a DJ, a skateboarder, an artist, an incredible member of the Burlington community, the hip hop community, the skateboarding community, just the community in general, just a real humble, rad human. Um, and I was lucky to have him as a friend for many years after I moved here. I first met him at the B side, I think, when he was working at the B side, the skate shop back in the day.
That was my favorite store in Burlington. Oh yeah.
That place was awesome. Yeah, it was like something incredible to walk in there when I first moved here and be like, holy, like this, I've like been looking for a place like this my whole life. And I met him and like Andy Lugo, who were some of my earliest friends here in Burlington, working there. But anyway, A-Dog, like I said, DJ, he was like always playing at the shows. He was opening for every hip hop show. Like if you went to see anybody at the Higher Ground, he was going to be the opener. He was like Burton's house DJ. So he was at all the big snowboarding events. He was everywhere. And he passed away from a rare form of leukemia he had like been struggling with for several years toward the end of his life. I don't know exactly how long it was, but definitely in the last, like year and a half, a lot of the time he spent was in a hospital, getting bone marrow transplants, trying to find bone marrow donors, all those kinds of things. And ultimately he passed away. It was either like the night he passed or the night after he passed that myself and Capes and John Young, who was also a friend of Andy's, who's an artist from St. Albans, Vermont, and Wisdom, the four of us met up in the alley outside of Nectar's, which had been, I don't even remember whether there still was something there, but that had been an alleyway that had been like used for some graffiti events. Like it was like maybe they did like an after party there, and there had been
a great spot for it.
A great spot for it. Yeah, so we went there and like in a snowstorm, literally, and walked in and said, "We're gonna paint Andy on the side of the alleyway
in a snowstorm."
In a snowstorm.
And now I asked Will about this, about the certain types of paints that might work better in the cold. And I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but he didn't have any comment on that. I feel like you talked about that though a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, what we did, and it was actually, I think it was like the first time I'd ever done it. But so yeah, spray paint below freezing spray paint stops working very well. It does become it's like functional, but it can be real shitty. So I took my like big Coleman cooler and I filled the bottom of it with Nalgene bottles filled with boiling water. And we kept the cans in the cooler on top of that to keep them warm enough to function. And they basically were like hand warmers.
I was going to say, yeah, it's like a hand warmer. Yeah.
But like you could take one out and you could use it for like 10 minutes. And then it would get cold because they get colder while you're using them anyway. The whole aerosol releasing thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then you'd have to swap colors. But yeah, we just like walked in and we were like, we're going to paint Andy in the alleyway because he had just passed away. So many people loved this dude. And we knew that it was like something needed to happen immediately that like everyone could be like, oh, okay, I feel minorly better, and Nectar's they were like beyond on board. They were like open tab for you guys all night. Come in and warm up whenever you want. Let us know what you need. I think we ran a power cord out their door, and yeah, so we painted the piece that's still on the corner of Nectar's,
and it's an iconic piece in Burlington as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it definitely, a lot of people take photos in front of it. And I mean, dude, like the next day, tons of people were taking photos in front of it. We were seeing it in our social media feeds. And the next week it was the cover of the 7 Days.
Awesome.
So yeah, that was a big deal.
That's a nice gesture for your homie.
It just felt like it had to happen, and it's like that there's an aspect of graffiti culture and street art culture that's always going to be about that, right? It's like there's a message that needs to be sent right now. Everybody needs to hear it. And where are you going to do it? You put it on the street, on a hot street corner where everybody
right. It's not quite a corner, but it's right by an alley that
yeah,
tons of people fucking walk by,
yeah.
and it's not even down the alley. It's like right at the
No, it's the
beginning of the
tip.
alley.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um,
Even if you're
and so
walking by the, even if you're walking by the other way, you can still catch it out the side of your eye.
yep.
Yep.
So that was obviously, this was the day after, or it might have seriously been the day of. I can't remember. It was like December 28th, I think, is when he passed away, and it was right then.
Yeah.
And that was, so it was before like Friends for A-Dog was a thing. There wasn't like an organization yet or any of that. That came about in the next year or so. I think, people like Justin REM and oh man, I'm gonna space Josie, who was A-Dog's partner. These guys all got together and started, Trina from Maven Skate Shop. They got together and started forming this organization. And in the first few years, it was just this like annual event to celebrate Andy's life, and it was always about like all the skaters get together up at UVM on top of the hill and bomb down the hill together, and then there's like a skate competition, and there would be hip hop, and and it was kind of like, it was like a skateboard culture event. And we were always involved some way. We would do some kind of live painting. One year we like wrapped cellophane between the trees in City Hall Park and painted on those. One year we
saw that. Yeah.
We were just like always involved. And that was still before they had built the skate park, any of that stuff. And then as the organization grew and the event grew, we kind of got left behind, and it was like unintentional. I think like nobody knew how to communicate with us about it, or maybe some people didn't even really know who we were. I'm not really sure what happened. I'm sure it was, maybe there was some politics involved, but it's unimportant. And that very first year that like the event had been announced and we had not been talked to and we weren't going to be a part of it, we were just like, well, A-Dog Day is for everybody. Like, that's what would Andy do, kind of a thing. Like, this is about everybody. It's about the whole community. And we decided we would just like take matters into our own hands. And so we went out the night before the event, like literally like in the middle of the night. It was like 1:00 in the morning when we started. We wrapped black cellophane around every one of the downtown poster boards that would be like all the events upcoming, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
And between the hours of like 1 a.m. and sunrise, we painted pieces on
so
every.
You went guerrilla.
We went guerrilla. No, we had no permission. The city didn't know what was going on.
Did you feel bad about being left out?
I mean, yeah, a little bit, but at the same time, we were just like, well, it doesn't matter. Like, we'll just, like I said, like, we'll just take matters into our own hands. And so we just went out and did what we would have done, what we wanted to do anyway. And it was, almost, we felt bad. Like, man, I hope we don't stir up any shit. I hope nobody gets in trouble, that kind of thing. And the next morning I went down to the skate park where everybody was skating that year. And everyone was walking up to us and being like, yo, what y'all did last night, like, that was next level kind of thing,
So people figured out it was you guys.
They knew it was us. Yeah.
Did you leave a calling card?
No, but like, who else is using spray paint?
So they just recognize your medium or whatever.
Yeah, it was the art form that, and everybody was like, oh, holy shit, like those guys went out and did it, and then that literally, like, so we did it that once with no permission, and then we just that just like carried on, and we've been doing it every year ever since, with like, sometimes the police try to stop us, sometimes we get cut off, sometimes we make it through the night. So it's like, because we've never had permission from the city to do it, although we're not damaging anything because we wrap these boards in plastic. We've had pushback from like other promoters who are like, you covered my poster. We're like, yo, cut the shit down. It's like, it's a plastic wrap.
It'll be fine. It'll be over in a couple days. Yeah.
It's one day, last year, like, there's one still up on the corner of Main Street, and it's like all the posters are holding all the cellophane in place. It's like still running. It's hysterical. But so that, like, our participation in A-Dog Day has always been like, initially we were like a part of the event. Then we kind of just made ourselves a part of the event. Then we were invited back to be a part of the event.
Oh,
And we've done like
good.
things at the King Street Youth Center as part of the Friends for A Dog Foundation, who, they do all kinds of like scholarship programs for young musicians and art programs for kids, and um, obviously skateboarding programs. What that foundation does in the city of Burlington is really something special and beyond. I mean, they have like a youth program there where like kids go back and forth from here in New York City. Like they bring a bunch of kids from New York up to go snowboarding for a
Sure,
week.
one of them fresh air type of programs.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, what that organization does is pretty amazing, especially knowing that it's literally just like a handful of passionate people who just like keep it going, because again, it's like, what would Andy do kind of a thing. Like, how can we carry out the man's legacy in a way that's more than just throwing money at something or whatever. And it is actually, A Dog Day is like an official Burlington city holiday
Oh,
now.
it's a straight up holiday in Burlington.
It's huge. It's huge. The event is massive. It's like all day long, and every single year you see the same faces who you probably haven't seen in a year, because it's like people from all over Vermont and beyond. I mean, Tony Hawk came to the event like 3 years ago or 4 years ago, something like that. Like,
Damn,
showed up and skated the bowl with all the kids. It's like,
that's fucking amazing.
yeah, it's, I mean, and it's like, yeah, it's massive, and it's always hella fun, and all these skaters always come. There's always like big sessions, and you go down to the skate park, and that it's like 500 people converge, and then it's sometimes it's like it's gone to foam, it's gone to nectars, it's gone to metronome. It kind of like bounces around the city, and usually it's still like a dope hip-hop show at 1 a.m. So it's
Awesome.
a proper celebration of his life in a way that like really truly does you know remember who he was. So pretty rad.
A proper homage.
Oh yes, we'll call it that.
Word up. Let's go to the next one. What do I got here? Above the radar.
Above the Radar. Yeah, so Above the Radar is an international graffiti festival that we have been hosting for, well, 5 of the last 6 years. We had to skip one there for the pandemic, or whatever you want to call it, the sickness. So yeah, so that's definitely an Anthill Collective project. Above the Radar is a direct, like, it's again, it's like a passion project for Brian and I, for Capes and I, for the Anthill. And it is one that I would say, like, more of the heads who are like Anthill peripheral like, we all put that event together, because it does take more than Brian and I to do it. And that's, it's like, we started it because we were going to jams like Under Pressure in Montreal, and we went down to Art Basel in Miami a couple of times. Some other, like, Art Factory down in Connecticut, some different events that we had been to that were, large scale graph jams, where you're like, you got people coming from all over the place and painting a wall or a series of walls around a city together for the course of a weekend or a week, or, it's different in different places. But our project has always been, it's a 3-day festival. Takes place like the second or third weekend in September. Usually it's been different. This past year we pushed it forward and became part of the Art Hop annual event that has been going on for 30 plus years. I think.
Feel free to tie the Art Hop in with this at the end if you like.
It is literally now tied together. So
yeah.
So what it is we bring in artists primarily from around the Northeast, just for the sake of logistics. Montreal, New York, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Maine, New Hampshire, Mass, all, it's like the Northeast. I think we've had New Jersey. And then every now and then there's like an outlier from like California or Florida, or, well, I don't think we've ever had Florida, but anyway, you get the idea. And they're all like friends of ours. They're people who we've met by going to other jams, or it's like a friend of one of our friends from another jam. And it's become this family event. Like I said, this past year was our 5th one. It was originally at the 1 King Street location, which is right down at the bottom of King Street here in Burlington, where the ferry dock used to be. It used to be like the ferry from Plattsburgh, I guess. I think maybe not Plattsburgh. I don't know. But so it was like an entry, like a port of entry to the city, you know. And that spot happened to have this like beached whale of a wall. It's a 260-foot, 20-foot tall or 30-foot tall concrete wall, perfect cinder block, clean surface, and it had like a third of it was covered in a mural when we found it that was really washed out, probably 20 years old, 30 years old, had not held up terribly well. And we approached the building, the property owners, who it's the, you know, the folks who own the Lake Champlain ferries, the Picor family, who have been incredibly helpful to us over the years. And approached them about it, and we were like, look, we'd like to do this event, and we'd like to do it at this location, and these are kind of the logistics, and we're going to bring artists in from all over the place. You're not going to get to see a sketch, you're not going to get to like know what's happening. You just have to kind of trust us that it's going to be really dope. Yeah. And like, what's the worst that happened? We painted your wall for you. And they bought in, you know, and they believed in us. And that first year we did the jam, and it was just like off the hook. It was, you know, it was like 7 Days was there filming. The mayor was down there checking it out. Like everybody was just like, holy shit, what is this? And you know, it's pretty incredible to watch like 30 plus artists. Maybe some of them know each other. Maybe some of them haven't had the pleasure of meeting each other yet. And all of a sudden by Saturday afternoon, they're all like, yo, if you use a little bit of orange over here, and like, I would bring this over to, you know, and like everybody's working together, in this massive piece of art that was not planned at all takes place and becomes this like magical thing, you know? And so, yeah, we've been doing it, like I said, now this was the fifth. So we took 1 year off. This was the 5th event. And this year we had to move it to a new location. The ferry dock that was the ferry dock is not a ferry dock anymore. It's a marina. So it's kind of like the logistics have changed down there.
Yeah, it sounded like maybe there was a little bit of contention about maybe like keeping the piece, or I feel like we talked about this last time I was in Burlington.
Yeah, I mean the old mural is, I think it's gonna just stay on the wall for as long. Like no one asked us to paint over it. No one wanted to. We had thought a little bit about like, does it make sense? So they're gonna build boat storage in front of it,
right?
Which means that a lot of it's going to be blocked for a lot of the year, because all these boats that get forklift in and out and stuff. But at the same time, there's like magical history on that wall that there's no real reason to remove it. You know, when you take a boat out, you're going to get a little piece of this magical project. That's
if I had a boat, that would be the best part about leaving.
So anyway, so that was the 1 King Street, and then we moved it down to 180 Flynn Avenue, which is like a really poppin' area of Flynn Ave right now. It's right across from the new city market. Well, it's not new anymore, but the city market down there. And most importantly, it's right outside of Burlington Beer Company, which is
sound like you got a sponsorship from those guys or something.
Yeah, Burlington Beer Company hooked it up this year. Not only in that, like, so we the Picor family who owns the ferry docks, they hit us up and we're like, we're not gonna be able to do it at 1 King Street anymore, but we've got this other location. Do you want to come look at it? And then they immediately were like, also, the Burlington Beer Company has expressed that they're interested in doing an art hop event, but they have no idea what to do. And so it was like a no-brainer for everybody. Like we've got a pre-built event that we know is going to be successful, that we know is going to be a draw.
And a great spot too.
And it did. It turned out to be a really great spot. It's almost better than the old location because there's less like thoroughfare to it.
Yeah, you've got those nice cornered walls. It's right. It's like squared off, dude. You got parking right there. You had food. You had a Kyle spinning music. I mean,
yeah, it worked out pretty beautifully. And yeah, the Burlington Beer Company got on board, sponsored us, served beer at the event, served food at the event, which were two things we've never been able to do before.
Awesome.
Because we didn't have like licensing and all the other shit. And there was like not enough room to do it down there. So, well, we've served food at the old one, but we never had beers, which was, it was like always this thing. Like all the artists are like sneaking beers up on
Right.
the
And all the people showing up are like, where can I get a beer?
Yeah, exactly. So it worked out great. Burlington Beer Company was an incredible sponsor. The Lake Champlain Transportation Company has always been a sponsor.
Oh,
That's been really great. Yeah, and and so now it's like 6 years since we started doing it, and like I don't see an end in sight. I every year that we do it,
good.
there is this moment where we're like, why on earth are we still doing this? Like the Anthill does not make any money off of Above the Radar. Let me be very clear. It's not a for-profit event, but it's also not a nonprofit because we're not a nonprofit and don't know how to write grants. And so we do it by the seat. We do it by the seat of our pants every year, but we always get it done, and it's always dope, and the art is always amazing. And
Phenomenal, dude. I wish I didn't. I came on Friday, and I wish I would have come later because I only got to see the beginning stages of it. And this is the first year I've got to come. I've been trying to come out, and it just hasn't worked out the last few years. But goddamn, after seeing what I saw Friday and then seeing the end result, it was like, fuck. Next year, I'm just gonna camp out in the parking lot. I'm gonna pitch a tent next to Kyle.
Yeah, the thing to do is just like check in for an hour or two every day all weekend long. And now that it is part of the Art Hop, which is this like massive sort of city, not really citywide, but definitely like community wide event that takes, it's like all of Pine Street is Art Hop. And I think they say, I don't know whether these numbers or where these numbers even come from, but I think they say they get like 30 or 40,000 people to hit Pine Street over the course of those 3 days for Art Hop. So, if we can really figure out how to tap into that a little bit more than we did this year, again, it was sort of like last minute decision making this year to do it that same weekend. Then I think it's, the event is going to continue to grow. Our relationship with Art Hop will grow, Burlington Beer Company, all of that. And it's going to be like, I think it's going to benefit everybody. So, yeah, we're looking forward to continuing to do it.
It should benefit everybody. And you guys should make money. I'm just going to put that out there.
Someday we'll probably figure that out. I mean, it's like at least it doesn't cost me. This is the same way I feel about Third Thursdays. It's like, at least it doesn't cost me money anymore. We've got enough sponsorship. We've got enough people that I mean, it's a passion project, and the 3 days of being able to hang out with people who I love, who I never see, watching them make art, talking to them about art, talking to them about their, just like tapping in that way it's just awesome. It's like an annual family barbecue. And yeah, we got Kanga and Rico James, and like there's always these dope artists that come through and records for us. And Mr. Burns has helped out a lot with that event over the years, the last few years. I just like that was like trying to organize the music of the event and organize the event became like one thing too many at some point. And I tapped Mr. Burns, and he's been able to really, really help me out a lot with that. And Kanga, you're just like, it's like, Kanga, I got a weekend long event and I might need a DJ at any hour of any given day. And he's like, cool, I'll be there and crush it.
I'll set up anytime you want and impress everybody that shows up.
Yeah. So, he's a ringer. That's why he's got an Anthill cat. Or 3. He probably got a few, actually.
He's a Hall of Famer. I'm going to put him in the Hall of Fame category.
Yeah. He really is, man. I mean, like one of the most he's just incredibly good at what he does. And
I want to see him have a bad night. I keep saying this. I want to see him suck one time just because I get fucking tired of watching him just crush it on just this such a high level every fucking night. It's like, I want to do tricks with him where we fucking maybe tie a hand behind his back and let him play with one hand.
I don't think it would slow him down much, man. He would just adjust. He would adjust.
He'd grow a second hand out of the first hand.
He's a savage, and yeah, I mean, he's like 100% always ready to rock, and he's just been so
professional. His level of professionalism is just through the roof. Like, he doesn't show up unprepared, which is something I really appreciate about Kyle.
Yep. Yeah. And and even like also the local graph writers as well, man. Like when we first did the event, it was very much about like inviting friends in from out of the city who we considered to be at like a certain level of of the game, you know what I mean? Like in terms of like their international respect or whatever. It was like really about bringing artists in who were gonna blow people's minds. And honestly, since we started doing it, watching the growth of the local scene and the way they've all stepped up and stepped in and are now a part of the jam is also like pretty amazing, you know. Like we know we have a handful of writers here in Vermont who like we can count on these dudes. Like if somebody doesn't show up, you can plug Fortune in on the wall and Fortune's gonna kill it, you know. And like so yeah, it's you know, we, and again, these dudes are all, it's like those are the people that have become like the Anthill family, the Anthill crew. And it's awesome to know that we can count on them. You know, we could do like, in fact, the 1 year of the pandemic, we basically just did the jam on our own. Like it was just locals, you know, it was just, like just the cats that we know and love, and we're just like, well, we'll just paint like a small wall, but at least we can get together and have a barbecue. But yeah, awesome. So that's above the radar.
Yeah, and I'd like to ask you about the name Above the Radar, because I feel like that has to do a lot with the history of graffiti art.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, it is sort of, I have to admit, there's like a play on Under Pressure and Above the Radar. I don't know, there must have been something in my head there, in our heads there, because Under Pressure, you know, that's an incredible graffiti festival that's been going on in Montreal for 20 plus years now. And
great title too, great name, whoever fucking named that.
And was definitely like really I feel like that's the one that when we went to Under Pressure a handful of times and got involved there, we were like, I want to do this in Burlington. Like this is what we want to do. This is what we're looking
a little inspiration from Canada.
For sure. But yes, Above the Radar, the idea there was that, you know, as graffiti writers, the work that we do is typically under the radar, right? It's like no one ever knows who you are. No one even sees half the shit we do, especially
might be illegal sometimes.
Right. And especially
illegal or whatever.
Especially here in Vermont, like until recently, there was never really that much of like a street graffiti scene. So it's like we were like painting in culverts and under bridges and shit like that. We're like the only other people who are ever going to see this work are other graffiti writers. And so the work is all under the radar. And so yeah, the idea was like, okay, we were very specific about the jam, that it was not a street art festival. We were not inviting just muralists. It was a graffiti festival. It is about graffiti. It's about letters. It's about that culture. And there's definitely like some gateway graffiti, like people who paint portraiture and do other things. But it's always been about like people with a background with the spray can, knowing how to use aerosol, and like that's the work we want to show people and showcase people, and showcase for the community, because graffiti is like one of the largest international art movements in the world right now. You just can't buy it. Like you could pay a graffiti writer to come and make this work in your home or whatever. But
which, like, my mom did, I think. Heps did that nice piece.
And you know, we've been commissioned a lot of us have been commissioned many times and are now like making something like a living off of it. But we found a lot as the Anthill that like we would show people our portfolio, we would explain the work that we wanted to do, we would show them sketches. And then like all of a sudden when we mentioned a spray can, they would be like, oh, well, I didn't, well, maybe not. It might not be a good fit. And we're like, what are you talking about?
They look at your art and then you tell them what you made it with. And they're like, oh, sorry, we can't do that.
Yeah. It's like, oh, the medium somehow is problematic. It's like, I just showed you that I paint like mountains and sunsets and other shit with a spray can. I could do exactly the same thing for you. I'm not going to come in and tag the bathroom. But it's just like there's this stigma around the art form. There always has been. There maybe kind of always will be. And we wanted to, you know, Above the Radar was about like breaking down that boundary a little bit and showing people that like it's a bunch of grown ass men and women who have been perfecting this art form in horrendous situations, like under bridges covered with bum piss, and
for a long time here, for decades.
For decades. And so like you don't have to think of it. Yeah, there is a street, you know, vandalism part of it. That's
where it came from.
But it's not just that anymore, and it's grown past that. And so yeah, we just really wanted to show people that, and that's really what Above the Radar is about. Beyond the fact that at this point it really is like we just want to keep doing it every year because I just want to see my homies and feed them burgers and shit. So,
And have you ever gotten in any trouble for spray painting anywhere?
I have, I
Yeah.
did, I've been arrested more than once, and I did do a short stint in the Montgomery County Correctional Facility outside of Philadelphia.
Just for painting?
For painting, yep, yeah, I mean, so when you get caught, if you get caught, first of all, you do have to basically get caught red-handed, and I did get caught red-handed, and it's because I was being a drunken dumbass.
Uh,
Um, you know, but it's if you get caught red-handed, then your situation becomes very much in the hands of the property owner and how they
uh,
choose
like
to
if they like art or not.
well, more importantly, how they choose to repair the damage that you've done. And so, like,
Damage.
if you're painting a piece
Damn it.
this big, but you painted a building that's like 100 yards long, and they decide that now they're gonna repaint the whole building orange,
Ah.
then all of those gallons of paint just is what you just paid for, and then
Oh no, dude.
you go from criminal mischief to felony real quick.
Wow, dude.
Um,
That's fucked up.
Based on a dollar sign. So,
Wow.
so yeah, I was originally charged with felony, felony,
Femini. That's
yeah, sorry, yep, felony criminal mischief, and I pled it down to a misdemeanor. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, I did actually spend some time in prison,
wow.
for
Painting.
Yep,
You went to jail for painting.
I did. Yep.
Okay.
It's one of my truly proud moments.
Fuck. As long as you're proud of it. I was about to have a feel bad moment. I would like to switch topics here if we could.
Okay.
Okay, cool. I wanted to ask you about how you linked up with all these guys at the Green Door Studios, because I just interviewed Will yesterday, who's
Yes.
just a fucking wonderful human being and one of my favorite people that I've met recently. And Nicole, I haven't had a lot of chance to talk to, but I'd really love it. Boy, she's just, her art is fucking phenomenal. And I'd like to know how you sort of came together.
Yeah, the Green Door is like a ray of light, man. Well, so the Green Door studio physically is literally like it's the back door of the studio I was speaking about earlier that Brian and I originally shared. That very first studio that I had on Pine Street, and then that we had on Pine Street. So I have always been familiar with the space. The Green Door studio has been there for 20 years. It used to be heavily like a printmaking studio and some other stuff. They made paper and did printmaking primarily.
Yeah, we were talking about the fucking paper on the ceiling.
Yep, there's paper pulp all over the ceiling. And so I knew the space. And Brian and I had that studio in the back corner there. And then we got asked to leave that studio because we're, a bunch of weed smoking, beer drinking vandals.
Degenerates.
And like that's not for everybody, I guess. So we got kicked out of our old studio by the guy who was running it at the time. No need for names. And we got a studio out in Hyde Park, Vermont.
Hey, that's my country over here.
Yeah, it's way out there by Morrisville. And it was like this 1,400 square foot warehouse space, like perfect for us for what we always envisioned the Anthill studio would look like. We had room to like spread out. We could pull a truck in. Like it was perfect, except for that it was in Hyde Park, which is like the middle of effing nowhere. And an hour plus from my home here in Burlington. It was pretty close to where Capes lives out in Eden. And then at the time, Harrison was at Johnson State, so it wasn't too far for him, but it was definitely far for me, and it was pretty expensive space. Like we had a hell of a lot of fun out there. I loved going out there. I would go out there like 2 or 3 days a week, and I would just spend the night and drive home the next morning. and it was super fun, but it was like impractical ultimately over the long span, as we were there for maybe like 3 years or something like that. And just as we were like looking at the finances of it, it was like, this doesn't make any sense. So we were looking to downsize, and we were looking to get back into a Burlington space potentially. At least I was, for sure. You know, I'm not sure that Brian was maybe as excited about Burlington per se.
Yeah, right. But Hyde Park is 20 minutes from Brian. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, there's that. But and I mean, it was also like a lot of what we do, you know, above the radar. And I think we were like above the radar was coming up for that year. And so it made sense to kind of like get all of our shit
Sure.
that we needed here into Burlington again. Um, and I knew Nicole was running the place. I knew Steve Sharon pretty well, who's the fourth artist that
So Nicole and Steve were there before you guys.
Nicole's been there for 12 years.
Okay, cool.
And so I've known her from around the scene in that regard for a while.
Awesome.
And then, and I kind of knew what was like, it seemed like this, like my buddy Jason Pappas used to have a studio there. Steve Sharon I sort of knew what was going on there. And I was like, I wonder, you know, if I hit up Nicole, like maybe I could kind of like throw an elbow into it and be like, hey,
Weasel your way in there.
yeah, like I'd really like to have a studio in the Green Door studio. It seems like the right location for me. And there was, it happened. There was a woman who was like doing some ceramics work or something in there, and who wasn't really utilizing the space. And Nicole was like, actually, you know what? I've been meaning to do this for a minute. And she asked this young woman to pack up and get out because she wanted people in the space who were like active and doing things. And the Green Door had gotten very stagnant. Let's just say there wasn't a ton going on.
So this is a revitalization, as it were.
It kind of was, yeah. So I moved in Brian and I moved in, the Anthill moved in, brought as much as we could from the old space that would fit into this new space. Steve Sharon was there, Nicole was there, and there was a guy named John there who was making jewelry in the space. Cool guy. He had a very small corner. He's like, basically his studio is now where Nicole's is. Anyway, and yeah, it's like things started getting like active, and we started, you know, they were like I was using the space frequently. I'd see Steve there frequently, but it still was like not quite there. And then it was Will who, like, Nicole invited Will into the space because she saw his work and saw his vibe and was just like, I think this guy would make a great addition to what we've got going on here right now. And she invited him in to share the space that she was in at the time. And the two of them packed themselves into this little room. And it was like Will coming in with all the energy and the life that he is. And like he's going to be at the studio every single day, no matter what. He's going to make art every single day, no matter what. Nothing is going to stop that dude from getting down to that studio. He doesn't care if there's 3 feet of snow on the ground and he's got a wheelchair through it to get there. He's going to go
wheelchairing through snow to get to the studio.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That dude works harder every day just to get the places that he has to get than most people work, you know, like when they go to the gym. So yeah, he came in, and then, you know, as soon as like there was this little bit of, I think he and I were like, I've known who Will was for as long as I've lived in Vermont. He's always been here. He was working at Old Gold. I've always seen him around. We always were like at the same shows in the same places and literally never spoke to one another. And we've discussed it enough that I'm like, we're both convinced it's like, we would have probably clashed and hated each other back then. But once he and I got past this initial like sort of tension of, you know, I'm not sure I actually like you, and started like hanging out together at the studio, it just clicked. And, you know, so it got to the, like, now it's at the point where like I go to the studio 3 nights a week and expect to see Will there, not because he's like beholden to me, but he's going to be there. And we're making art together constantly. And it really, yeah, like that's what, like, his presence is what really jump started it and got the space fully activated again to where like we're doing shows constantly. We went from like basically being open for art hop, and maybe there might be like one other art show a year or two, like two art shows a year, to we now our plan for 2023 is not only is there an art show every first Friday, but there's a hip hop show every third Thursday.
So
So
that's the deal. First Friday art show, third Thursday hip hop show.
correct. That will be
Cool.
the Green Doors calendar for this
Awesome.
upcoming year. So
And I wanted to tie this into sort of because I saw that I think it was Brian maybe who did some art for the dispensary at Winooski Organics. I don't know which one of you did that, but I saw he also did some work for Stone Leaf, and I love to see you guys getting tied up with the cannabis community here.
yeah, man. And thank you for that. Frankly, like you've played a role in all of that. The work in Winooski Organics we did together. That was a collaboration. We
Looks
went in
great
there.
too.
Thanks, man. That was a fun one. Yeah, that was we did that like one night right when they first were about to open. I don't even think they actually were licensed yet when we put that one on the wall. And then when I actually went back in there with Will, who did some paint behind the scenes in there as well in their bathroom.
Oh, sick! I haven't seen that.
Brian has done work for Stone Leaf. I think he's got another one that he's been working with.
That Stone Leaf piece he did looks fucking ridiculous.
It's amazing. And that's another cool thing that's begun to grow out of the Anthill is like we are incredibly comfortable working together. We work together like one brain, honestly. Like people who watch us work together on projects are always like, damn, like it's like you both know exactly what the other one is going to do
It's like
next.
you've met him before.
It's like, yeah, it's like you've been working together for a while. Like we're very fluid when we work together. There's not a lot of arguing. There's not a lot of fussing. It's just like one of us takes lead and the other one falls in. And that those roles can be passed back and forth very fluid.
Yeah.
But also we've both become comfortable working on our own, and and knowing
like the Wu-Tang, dude. Like they have the Wu-Tang albums and they all have solo albums.
All have solo work. It's totally. And and a lot of that, it's sometimes that's just like geographic and time. Like there are places that it makes sense for Brian to just like go and do a project for them because they're right up at J, and it's going to be hell for me to get back and forth and do that for 2 or 3 days, but it's going to be really easy for him. And likewise here in Burlington, sometimes it's just like, dude, I could bang this out in 2 hours and it doesn't make any sense for you to come with me. So I'm just going to go rock it. But yes, we've had, much like the food truck boom of the early 2000s and 2010s, there is now the weed culture boom. And I don't expect to see that train slow down anytime soon either. You know what I mean? I do feel like there's got to be some kind of like a bubble thing that will happen where like not every one of these dispensaries that opened up is actually going to succeed.
Oh, sure. In the hemp market, that happened in the first year. 90% of hemp businesses folded in the first year.
Right.
But that's because they went ahead and licensed like 600 people at the exact same time, and it kind of I feel like the one good thing about the licensing delays with the cannabis market is that it might allow people to come on time, like online slowly, and not flood the whole market. So we'll see. But for sure, I mean, in any startup market, people are going to go out of business.
Yeah, as I am living proof. So
I didn't mean that about you, buddy.
But hey, we're bringing the story full circle here. But yeah, we've definitely been enjoying it. It's a cool. Again, it really is. It's like very similar to what we did with food trucks. Like we painted 3 different taco trucks over the course of our time painting food trucks and such. But every time we tried to like do it different, like bring a different flavor to it, bring a different style to it. We started, one of the first ones we ever did together, and we've done a bunch of work for them, is Taco Truck All Stars, the homie Wingnut. Big love to Wingnut. And we very much like created a look for Taco Truck All Stars that we never repeated, and we never
don't want to just do some cookie cutter bullshit, right? Like
exactly. And you know, and a lot of times people who are approaching us about this work are like, "Oh, I saw what you did in Winooski Organics. I want you to do something like that in our spot." And we're like, "Well, we can do something for you, but it's going to look different than that."
Are people approaching you because they saw that shit at Winooski Organics?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
brilliantly played. Yeah, yeah. I recently had a woman reach out about doing. I guess there's one of these like testing lab type places.
Steep
Not
Hill?
what's that?
Steep Hill?
Yeah,
I know both of those ladies. Yeah. Callie
yeah.
Chapman and Holly Himeseth.
Yeah. So yeah, they reached out about us maybe getting in there and doing some work on the walls, and that was directly based on her being in Winooski Organics and seeing the work that we had done on the walls in there. So, and it's always how it has worked. You know, people would see Wingnuts taco trucks and be like, "Who in the hell painted that thing for you? And how do I sign them up?" And so it's, you know, it's that word of mouth, which really at the end of the day, man, that's always going to be what makes most of these types of things succeed. You know, I tell everybody about Winooski Organics because they're
They're
really
great
good,
guys.
because they're really good dudes who've been really good to me, and I have never gotten anything but fire weed from them.
Yo,
And
Eddie and Dylan. Yeah,
yeah, you
great,
know,
great human beings.
and
Wonderful guys. Yep.
I fully agree, and we're definitely going to continue doing work with and for those guys. They're now like they're on board sponsoring Third Thursdays, which is rad. You know, it's like all of this. There's a lot of like good.
Yeah, I saw Forbin's getting in on the action a little bit. Word
Yep.
up to Nick and Angela over there. Thank you
Yep.
guys. Yeah.
Corbin's, Winooski Organics, Provisions Hip Hop, Garrett Haney's brand.
Garrett. Hey, Garrett, you motherfucker.
Yep. So yeah, there's a lot of like great collaborative energy being passed around between these different pieces of the culture right now, and that's super exciting, you know.
As it should be.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, sorry, I got a little eye there on that last one. The last thing I have on my list. Well, I got one after that, but I'd like to ask you about your tattooing and how you sort of transition into that, and how's it going?
Tattooing is awesome, and I love it, and it's a super amazing thing to like fall into this late in my life, when, you know, like 18-year-old me would have killed to get somebody to show me how to fucking run a tattoo machine. um and yeah, I mean, like I was designing tattoos at like 16. I gave myself stick and poke tattoos when I was
Did
like
you?
16,
Do you have
17.
one on your arm there?
No, you can't see any of them. There's one on
Okay.
my ankle. There's one on my ankle you can see still, but
Okay.
a lot of it's been covered up. But I was fascinated by, you know, like, I mean, dude, like it was the 90s and the Red Hot Chili Peppers were the thing, and like, you know, and like all of this stuff was good, and there was like dudes with tattoos were a part of the culture that I was fascinated by: skateboarding, surfing, snowboarding, hip hop music, grunge music. It was like I was a subculture kid. I wanted to be involved in the subculture. Um, got my first tattoos in like street biker shops when I was 18, you know, like immediately wanted to get tattooed, wanted to be a part of the culture. Found out that the culture was not very receptive in the 90s to like suburban white boys, you know what I mean? Um, Much like graffiti and hip hop, we're not necessarily incredibly
Sure.
inviting to a lot of that. And we just kind of like
Sure.
made our own versions of those things. But tattooing was one that was like, it was always a fascination to me. It was always something I wanted to do, but I also recognized that it was like not something you want to fucking do wrong. Right? Like it's not like painting graffiti where like you just go out, you paint it. If it sucks, you paint over it. If you know, if you're whack, you're just whack. Like I didn't want to be whack on someone's human anatomy. Um, and so it, you know, like when I was in art school, I had a couple of buddies who were into tattooing, and you know, I asked them about it, and it was always this kind of like you're not, you know, that this ain't for you, kid, type thing. Um,
Not in my
and then
backyard. You
yeah,
fucking.
and then honestly, like when I moved up here, you know, like I said, in like 98, so I was like 23 or something like that. Um, and at that point, not only had I like given up my dreams of becoming a tattooer, I had like given up my dreams of becoming an artist. I was just like, I was playing in the woods and going rock climbing and going mountain biking and having a great time and traveling and like learning all sorts of new shit about the world. And and like, I mean, dude, the first time I came to Vermont, I was like, where are all the fucking street signs? Like, where's the billboards? And like, I had never seen this world.
They don't exist.
I grew up in New Jersey, right outside of New York City, went to college in Philadelphia. I had never even like been to like New Hampshire, right? I didn't know about any of this shit up here. I really grew up like suburban, but like legitimately suburban. Um, and so I just didn't really know about a lot of it. But anyway, that's kind of like a side story. But
I love side stories.
yeah. So tattooing, which was always a fascination, always something I would have loved to have done, just never found its way to me. You know what I mean? And then, so what, like 4 or 5 years ago, Capes and I, in fact, like, okay, there was a little bit of money left over after Above the Radar that year. And the Anthill had a little bit of money in its bank account. We were coming into the winter and we didn't have anything to do and we didn't have a project and we didn't have anything on the horizon. And we were like, what if we opened a graffiti store? Like, what if we could find like a tiny little space somewhere around here that we could open a graffiti store in? And so we found a little spot out in Shelburne, of all places, not exactly a graffiti hub. Um, but we knew we had like enough connections and enough people that we knew that like maybe we could pull it off. We opened up this little 300 square foot space, like the size of your average like living room, basically, and started selling spray paint and markers and shit like that.
Oh, cool.
Basic graffiti supplies. And it was like kind of working. Like Brian would come and work one day a week and I would come and work one day a week, and we were like closed the other 5 days because we both had other shit to do, and like it wasn't exactly successful. It wasn't going to drown us either because we were sitting on a bunch of inventory that, like, if worst came to worst, I just put it all in my closet and use it all eventually.
Right, you're gonna use it somehow.
Yeah, it wasn't like I invested in anything I didn't want. And so we were doing that for a little while, and then the homie Hells, rest in peace, Hells. Hells had become a good friend of ours. He was there at the very first Above the Radar. He brought like the whole UW crew. He is a graph writer from Boston who had moved to Vermont a couple of years earlier. He was, kind of just trying to get away from the Boston scene, the Boston culture, and moved up here. Incredible tattooer, super talented graffiti writer, just like incredible artist in general. And at the time, he was working at Vermont Custom, and he hated it. He was like super miserable there, and I could tell all the time that he like didn't want to be there. And then one day he called me and he was like, "Yo, can you come pick me up at Vermont Custom? I just got fired." And I was like, "Oh, damn. Like, all right." Like I have a Honda Element, so I had like enough room in my car to take all of his shit out of there. So we throw his tattoo chair in the back of my car and all his gear and all his stuff. And I was like, "Yo, like, why don't you come and tattoo out at the Anti Gallery and like be inside of a graffiti store, which is like so much a part of your life, and you can be your own boss and you can make your own hours, and we'll just split the rent 50-50 down the middle. And like, no big deal. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. You could find another place to tattoo eventually. Maybe it'll work." So he came and started tattooing out of there, like out of the back room. Basically, there was like this little kind of like 8 foot deep, 10 foot wide closet in the back corner. The rest of the room was still like the graffiti shop / kind of like a lounge area. I had 2 turntables set up and a sound system, and Kanga would come out and spin records every now and then, shit like that.
Of course he would.
Of course he would. I set up turntables. What else is he gonna do? And it's like that. It was like this turning point again. It's like the shop started doing better because there was energy being invested in it. He was fucking super happy tattooing on his own clock, doing his own thing. He could sell spray paint when I wasn't around. I could sell, like it just kind of like started to work. And of course, now I've got this incredibly talented tattooer sitting in front of me every single day. I'm like, "So, yo, you want to teach me to tattoo or what?" And initially he was like, fuck that, I'm not teaching you to, just like every other tattooer I had ever spoken to in my life who I'd asked about it was like, yeah, nah. And I just like, again, I leaned in. I was like, I started, like I would make sure people were filling out their paperwork. I would make sure, like, if it was like something that could be designed easily on a computer, like, I want this, like the Serenity poem on my chest in this style of lettering. And I could like do that design work for him because I knew how and he really didn't.
Sure.
I would just like do the work.
Mm.
And there was one day we were at the shop and he had like 3 or 4 clients, and I ended up doing all of the design work for all of his clients that day. And at the end of the day, he just looked at me and he was like, fine, I'll fucking apprentice you. And I was just like,
You're
oh,
welcome.
I was like, okay, cool. And so I started tattooing with him. Unfortunately, about like 6 months later, he passed away. He one of the many people in our lives who've fallen victim to the opioid crisis in this country.
Fuck, dude.
So then I was like, okay, fuck, like now I've got all this equipment and all this ink and all this gear, and like what am I supposed to do with all this shit, and how do I go forward from here? Obviously that was like all kind of after or like during the time of also processing, like I just lost my fucking best friend. And I went over to Event Horizon, where I had been tattooed many times. A guy named Brant Newton owned the place, and I was like, tail between my legs again. Here I am, like, yo, will somebody here help me finish this? Like, I started something, and I really want to finish it. I really want to learn to do this. Like, what would Hells want me to do? I should fucking finish this out. And
you should finish it. It seems like, yeah.
And so I went there with Brant for a little while, and then the fucking pandemic kicked in. It was like, all right, so now all the tattoo shops are closed. And now what do I do? And luckily for me, at that same time, while I was working at Event Horizon, and the reason I went there was that my other homie, Jason Tooth, was working and tattooing at Event Horizon. I honestly thought when I went there that I was going to have Tooth apprentice me. I was surprised that Brant was willing to do it. I don't know that Tooth would have been willing to do it at the time. But anyway, the pandemic closes down all the tattoo shops.
Of course, yeah.
We're essentially told that when you go back to tattooing, you're going to be masked and all this other shit. And it was like, oh man, like this is going to be crazy. And Tooth and I, and I was still trying to run the anti-gallery, the graffiti store as well. So I was going to like be doing that 2 or 3 days a week and apprenticing 3 or 4 days a week, not really making any money doing any of it, but with no time to myself anymore. And, and like, and so Tooth and I decided to split off together and go back and open up the anti-gallery. So basically he was running his own tattoo shop out, like he was the licensed tattooer running a tattoo shop out of Anti-Gallery. I was still running the graffiti store.
Do you need a license for that to do tattoos?
Yeah. It's actually quite an extensive process. Yeah, you have to do a 1,000-hour apprenticeship in the state of Vermont to get a tattooing license. And unless you are partnered with a good friend and a good human, a lot of times that's going to cost you a lot of money.
Like somebody else who's also already been licensed.
Yeah, so you need to have somebody who's been licensed for over 3 years. That's who can offer apprenticeships.
Okay. So 3 years, and then they can teach other people.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
So it was like, luckily for me, I had this scenario where like I've already got this established business in space, and Jason really wanted to get out of the situation he was in. It was kind of like what happened with Hells. I became like the land for misfit tattooers, out of the graffiti shop out there. And Tooth was also a graffiti writer. Tooth was also a tattooer who had been tattooing for 20 plus years. He came from a very similar mindset as Hells, and really just kind of like threw me to the dogs and was like, figure it out. Like you want to be a tattooer, figure it out.
That seems to be the move. Yeah.
So far, so good. I was his apprentice
Your tattoos look nice. I've seen a number of them. Your line work is pretty clean, and yeah, for
I
someone,
appreciate that.
yeah, for someone as green as you, dude, I think you're doing a very good job.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I now I've been licensed for like almost 2 years.
Oh, so you're licensed now?
I'm licensed now. Yeah, so
Okay, cool.
I finished my licensure with Tooth. The
Awesome.
building that the anti gallery was in sold, and we were asked to leave because the new building owner wanted the entire space, and we like kind of hustled and tried to figure out where could we go next, what could we do. We were hoping to like pretty immediately find a space, but in the interim we landed out at 802 Inc., which is still where I am now. Tooth moved on, opened up his own shop.
So by the time I heard you were doing tattoos, you had already done the 1,000 hours of apprenticeship.
I think probably, yeah, or it was like right there in that moment.
Cool.
Yeah, so I've been doing it. If you include the apprenticeship and the short time off of the pandemic, I've been tattooing for like 4 years, and I've been licensed for, it's not quite 2 years yet. I haven't looked at the math, but and I've been at 802 Inc. for like almost a year and a half now. So
tell me about the first one you did. How did it go? Were you nervous? I assume you were fucking nervous.
Oh man, I've not only was I, but I've witnessed several other people doing their first tattoos. Now you shake like a fucking leaf. You're terrified. It's like, I'm gonna hurt this person. This can't possibly work. And yeah, it's really, really nerve wracking when you first start doing it. Sometimes it's nerve wracking still, like when like you take on bigger projects, bigger moves, bigger things. I got to fill this whole area with red,
or like colors and stuff. Yeah,
it will never be easy, and it will be a lifetime of continuing to learn something, which is probably one of the most exciting parts about it to me. Like, not like there wasn't still more to learn about how to manipulate a spray can, and there is still more to learn. There's more to learn about how to paint. There's like every bit of the art that I've been making my whole life, I still have a ton of things that I can learn and evolve.
You never really stop learning, do you?
If you do, you're probably gonna suck. So yeah, yeah, that first tattoo was bad. The tattoo turned out all right because like I had hells over my shoulder. I'm literally like, well, I can't get this line to really go in, man. Like, what's going on? He's like, well, I don't know. Why don't you fucking, for starters, why don't you stop shaking so much? I'm like, that's really not helping.
Get yourself together.
Yeah. It is. It's nerve wracking. And obviously, you're forever trying to just improve upon all of the little miniature aspects of the thing, and it's just like graffiti writing. It's just like painting. It's just like it's just that there's no erase button.
Right. It's not like spray paint. Like that's staying on someone's skin forever.
Yep. Yeah. So and you're not like standing up in a very loose and comfortable position. You're like, you're hunched over, like, yeah. I gotta get this line perfect, dog. Yeah, it's very different, but very much the same. And I'll just in that I will forever be figuring out how to do it as well as my mind's eye would like me to do it. But I love it. It's like definitely. If I'm gonna have a job that I need to, or like that I do, like I remind myself, this is a job I get to do for like 40 hours a week, and that's an incredible luxury. And
because you worked at it for so long,
but you're like, and it's work, but it's a privilege and it's an honor that anybody would ever let me put ink inside their skin. You know what I mean? Like that's some heavy shit to let another human being do, and I never take that for granted. It's so it's rad. I'm glad that I finally found something that I can be making art, practicing, and really doing, and also make a legitimate living.
Pays the bills.
Support my family, and it's been a long time coming. that like Mary Beth tolerated for quite some time, where it was like, well, I got $5,000 this month because we just finished a mural, and now I'll be broke for the next 6 months. I hope that holds, you know, like
So,
that.
so something a little more steady.
It's yes, you know, I mean, it's not like 100% consistent, and all my clients could disappear tomorrow and stop coming. But as it's been going, as it's been growing, if anything, it's only gotten more consistent and better. And you know, I'm working every day of the week.
That's really nice to hear, man. And I still got to get you to tattoo some lips on my butt cheek.
I mean, whenever you're ready, baby boy.
I know. I went broke real quick, and I had to cancel on you, and I was really sorry about that because I hate to fuck up your scheduling, but I still got to get you to tattoo some lips on my butt cheeks.
So we're still friends, so it's okay.
I hope so. I have one more question for you, Scottie. And then that's all. I'm out of shit. Is it true that you had dinner with Frank Sinatra one time?
Who told you that story? Amazing. Yeah, as a child. Yeah, so my mom, her family was in fact like pretty connected to, well, I mean, that's the phrase you use, right? They were pretty connected. Like the scrap metal industry in New Jersey and New York. And my Uncle Tony definitely had friends, you know, like Mario Cuomo was my Uncle Tony's friend.
Yeah.
Frank Sinatra was like my Uncle Tony's friend. And yes, while I only have incredibly vague memories of said dinner, I was super young. I was like maybe 4 years old or some shit like that. And I grew up in a like legit, very, very Italian family, even though I was adopted into the family. I was like treated, and you didn't say a fucking word at the dinner table when, you know, like it wasn't like I was allowed to like interact with Frank Sinatra or, you know, like but we all sat around a big ass table and had a feast that I'm sure my grandmother probably prepared. Yeah, wow, I don't know where the hell you got that one for. You do, kid does his research, you got to give it to him.
Where was grandma a good cook?
My grandmother killed it, bro. Yeah, so I kind of hinted at it there, and it's like this is like the last piece of my story that makes the first piece of my story not 5 minutes long. Is so I always tell people I was born in the Bronx, New York, but I never lived in the Bronx, New York. I was born in a hospital called Parkchester in the Bronx, New York, and proceedingly almost immediately sold for a envelope full of cash in a back alley to my adoptive parents. So I am not.
How much money?
From what I know, I believe it was 10 G's.
They should have gave you 100. Like you're worth 100.
Come on, dude. It was 1975. 10 G's is a lot of money for a baby.
Yeah, but you're good. You should have fetched 100.
So
even
yeah,
79.
I was a black market adoption. There's this whole like ring of black market adoptions that took place at that time in New York City, and my birth certificate was not printed until like a year and a half later. I was not legally adopted.
Are you being serious right now? I thought you were fucking with me for a minute.
No, I'm dead serious. This is legit. This is like my origin story, as it were. And I was adopted into this Italian family that the only reason my mother and father were able to adopt me is because of their connections to this Italian family that, yes.
And they took care of you.
They did, man. My Ma Dukes was absolutely like, my mom and your mom would have gotten along real well, man.
I suspect that.
my dad left when I was like 7, and we were all like, sweet.
Hey, my dad left when I was 7.
Yeah, we were like, let's get a dog.
My dad was like, I'm going to sell some drugs, and then he went to jail.
Yeah, my father didn't go to jail, but he left. My parents got divorced when I was like 7 or 8. He remarried, had another family, all of that. Was always in my life, but was not like my mom raised my brother and I. We lived with her. We were there, 6.9 days a week. We went to my dad's house for dinner.
It's nice to have good women in your life.
Hell yes. That's where the power comes from. So yeah, that's yeah, my you know, and yes, my grandmother was an incredible Italian cook. My mother was an incredible Italian cook. And I picked up as much as I could as a young boy in that kitchen. I was the youngest in my entire family. Like I had no cousins, siblings, nothing that were younger than me. I was definitely like the little dude. So
Awesome.
I spent a lot of time hanging out with the women in the kitchen.
Mm. Hey, hey, hi. Yeah, yep, cool. Look, Scottie, that's all I got for you, man. I want to first say thank you for your time, man. I love you, man, and this has been a
Absolutely, brother.
pleasure.
I love
And,
you
and
too.
I always leave the last word for my guests. If we missed anything, if you have any shameless shout outs or plugs or events coming up that you would like to blast, now is the time. But thank you again so much, dude. This has been a pleasure, man. Thanks.
Absolutely, my brother. Much love. Do I have? I mean, I think we plugged it all, but
I think we did.
you know, Above the Radar is in September. Third Thursdays take place miraculously on the third Thursday of each month. So if you look at your calendar and you count down, it will be the third Thursday. It's usually between the 15th and the 20th. We've got one coming up at the Green Door Studio. They will be at the Green Door Studio, which is at 4 Howard Street, usually starting around like 7, 8 o'clock and going until we stop. You can find me on Instagram at SK1, eskaeone, or at skinkvt, sk.ink.vt. Peace.
Thanks so much, man.
Much love, brother.